Oliver Farr, Salle University Special Collections librarian. Today here at Connelly Library, students from Dr. Bussey's Literary Perspectives course have built the first ever student-created library exhibit here at Salle University. The students' exhibit is titled The Art of the Book, The Subtle Intricacies Beyond the Text, and it features items from the Susan Dunleavy Biblical Literature Collection that's housed in special collections. Dr. Bussey, can you tell us a little bit about the course and the exhibit project?
So the course is part of the honors program at Salle University. It's the honors freshman triple. Students take courses in English, history, and philosophy, well, literature, history, and philosophy, and they're linked so they're with the same professors all year, and they start in the fall with sort of the Greeks and ancient times, and they make their way up to the 21st century at the end of the school year. And so in my section, we do works up to the Renaissance in the first semester, and I thought it would be interesting to have students actually look at history in a different way and look at literature in a different way. Often they grapple with these texts and they feel dated to them. They feel like they have no connection to people, right? They're these ancient things you just read. There's nothing living about them. And I wanted to show them that these things had a life, and how better to do that than to actually show them that the objects that people touched and people used and the different ways that people used them. Another thing I wanted students to do is that all too often what I see with my students is they feel like knowledge is a thing you have to reach out and find what other people produced and repeat it back. And the thing about these old books is that even if it's a book that other people have read, so this Fox's Book of Martyrs that we have here, there's a lot of them out there in the world. There were a lot of them produced in the time, but only our copy has the specific marginalia that our copy has. Every copy of these books is absolutely unique. So when the students look at it, there are no answers to who wrote these things, to what they wrote, to why they wrote, and that can enable students to ask questions and start to find out that they themselves can become the experts on something. And that's one of the things that I wanted to see happen in this project, and I think it did. If you talk to the students and you hear what they have to say, they really got a good sense of what they were looking at, and went out and found the answers to the questions that they had.
Group decide to focus either on bookmaking or marginalia and woodcuts for your exhibit?
I think for our group we were marginalia and woodcuts. There's like a picture, like a doodle of a bunny on one of the books in our exhibit, and I think that we just really focused on that, and then we wanted to expand on the idea of that.
And then for book construction, we were fascinated by the intricacies and kind of the differences in each book and how they're obviously constructed, so we wanted to dive deeper into that.
In terms of researching for the project, is there an item or a piece of information that you found particularly surprising or interesting?
I remember researching and seeing that woodcuts are reused, so it's not like each woodcut is made per picture per time it's used, so thinking that something that you're seeing in one book might be used in another one in a totally different way, I thought was really interesting.
And I thought it was interesting, I mean, comparing this book construction to now, you can get anything monogrammed with your initials or something like that, and that was something that was deemed, you know, more expensive and only certain people could afford that, whereas now you could go to, anybody has a Cricut machine, you could do that yourself, so that was very interesting and cool.
Well, is anybody else, anything like super cool in terms of like items in the special collections that you thought were interesting or surprised you a little bit?
Oh, you can go. You can go. Okay. In one of the books, or actually in a couple of books, like we found that there's writing that has nothing to do with books. Like one is an alphabet, and one is just like writing letters and like little notes to remember later, just because paper was really hard to come by back in the 15th and 16th centuries. So. That was cool.
I know, I again can't remember the exact source, but one of the books has a whole bunch of someone practicing their signature, and in a sense it's kind of relatable because at some point we were all there, not paying attention to something in a meeting, in a class, and I don't know, you doodle your signature, doodle again the picture of the bunny. It's the relatability that marginalia brings.
Cool. What part of building an exhibit did you think is the most challenging aspect of that? experience?
We just ran into this right now, is having a certain amount of space, but a lot of options to choose from, and having to, you can feel connected and like a lot of things, and at the end have to take them away. So it's really just having to decide which ones you want to put in there and which ones you want to keep out.
Kind of going off of that, like you just want to put every single book on in the exhibit, so kind of stinks the ones you have to weed out.
In terms of, like, this is the first time you've ever built an exhibit, right? Is the process of building your own exhibit change the way you perceive exhibits in museums, for example? Do you have a different understanding now of exhibits after building one yourself?
I think definitely, not even just the physical putting together of it, all the research and everything that goes behind it. I think it's very underappreciated when, if you go and see an exhibit, you kind of see everything that's physically there, but not everything that goes on behind the scenes.
And also with that, like Dr. Bussey helped us kind of narrow in what we wanted to focus on, but you can start with a book, and there's so many aspects of a book that you could focus on that it was kind of picking out, okay, what about the books? What about the things that you do, the aspects that you do choose about the book? So kind of just making it more of a narrow, focused topic.
And especially, like, all of the books were already here. So, like, I'm imagining, like, in exhibits in museums, like, you have to, like, go and find all of that. It's not just, like, in one nice location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll often have some of their own items included in the exhibit, but yeah, they'll go across the world, across the country, over the world, go to a museum in Europe and ask for a particular book to be on display. So yeah, it can be a great deal of work, even locating the item and then convincing the museum to loan it to you for an exhibit.
And also, like, the amount of items we had here, let alone, like, that we could probably find hundreds, if not thousands, of books that we would want to have in our exhibit.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? There are so many resources and there's so much history. So.
Can I add a question? When we started this, Heather and I originally wanted you to come in the fall, and we ended up online. So everything was virtual. What was different about seeing the books in person from where, because they started this, they even planned the 2 themes based on virtual images of the books. So how did it change you when you actually got to see the real thing?
I mean, for me, it just felt like when you're virtual, you see it and it's like, oh, it's a picture of a book. That's really not that fascinating when you're just looking at it. But the way you would both describe it, it was like, oh, this is a crazy thing. And then actually seeing the books, you feel like, wow, could I have been a person with this book or this book? Or you kind of like go back in history and time with the books. So it's definitely a lot cooler when you see it physically.
And, like, getting to touch it, I know that you, like, can't do that looking at the exhibit, but when we, like, looked at the books for the first time, I don't remember who it was, but it was, like, a bishop that got executed by...
Right over there.
Yeah. So, like, I was, like, looking through the pages, and you were like, oh, yeah, like, he was killed by Henry whatever, and I was like, oh, my God, like, this is his book, Henry VIII, and I was like, wow, I'm holding... Okay, that's cool. But, yeah.
Kind of like cool, because anyone could go on Google, type in marginalia book construction, you see an image, and you have no connection to that, but in a sense, I know they're real, but actually getting to see them, feel them, it's like, oh, they are real, like, they exist, it's a thing.
It really puts it in perspective, like, you're touching this book that's hundreds of years old, and you're like, how many people have touched this, like, who has touched this? That's probably the coolest part, it's just thinking of the history that's physically in and on the book.
I am so glad that you said all of these things because that's exactly how I think Dr. Bussey and I feel. We picked this book up and we're like, oh, who owned this book before? What is their story? Yeah, that's awesome. You guys did a great job. I really enjoyed working with you on this project. So you had all kinds of insights that I didn't even, many of the things that you said, I didn't see. So thank you. One of the most exciting aspects of working with the students on this exhibit was that they immediately viewed all of these items through the lens of lived experience. So they imagined themselves owning these Bibles, owning these religious treatises and imagined who those people were and how they lived, as well as how they suffered. For example, we have one book that was owned by a Catholic martyr who was executed by Henry VIII, and we know it was his book because his name, its features, is actually cut into the sides of the book. So students were able to relate to this martyr by touching the book, and so immediately the sort of materiality of the items was of interest to the students. And that's exciting to a special collections librarian. Often people look at the books and they're like, oh, that's cool, they're old. But when they start to associate it with people and their experiences, it becomes an intimate experience for them with the items. And the students all experience that sort of intimate connection to the items and are sharing with you those experiences in this exhibit.